Hey everybody, it's Romania Black. We're finally here. We're to the manga. Yay! So it is storming outside, but that's okay because we have Yona of the Dawn. Oh my gosh, I have been so excited for months to get to the manga. Ever since I think I was in around episodes 4 or 5, I was like, oh, I'm going to read the manga. And I was like, it has been a long time coming. And so I just finished today volume 8, which was great. I finished volume 7 a few days ago. I finished volume 8. I just finished the series finale. Oh my gosh. So good. But yeah, so basically what I'm going to be doing is, since sadly the anime ends with this first season, if any anime deserves a second season, it's Yona of the Dawn. It's so good. And it just ends right when you get all 4 of them together, right when it's getting good. It's so great. But it's like, what the heck? So yeah, it's just getting good and the anime stops. So there's that. But in any case, I'm really excited to start the manga. So I'm going to go through real quick and talk about volumes 1 through 8. That covers pretty much everything in the anime. And then we're going to read volume 9 today. So I'm pretty excited. I've bought the official releases, the official English translations. I've bought them online. So I'm really excited to read them and go through them with you all and then discuss afterwards things that just stand out, right? So going through the manga, I have been putting on my Twitter just various threads about the manga and just little things that I note. I will say, through volumes 1 through 6, it is pretty much a beat-for-beat adaptation in the anime, which I'm really happy about, because I've read other manga where when they're adapted, it's not... there's stuff left out, and it always makes me sad as a fan of that series, because little things that I think are important and need to be animated, when they're left out, you're like, you just get so excited thinking that's going to be adapted, and when it's not, it's very disappointing. But for the most part, there's only one section of Yona of the Dawn, volumes 1 through 8, that isn't really adapted in the anime, and we're going to talk about that. It's kind of out of place, and I guess there's a reason why they didn't adapt it. I'm sad they didn't adapt it, which is case in point. But volumes 1 through 6 are pretty much chronologically, it follows exactly like the anime. It's beat for beat, pretty much exactly what you would expect. And then volumes 7 and 8, the timeline and the way they organize the information starts to change a little bit. But I'd argue I get why the anime does that. So volume 7 picks up pretty much where Yona and Yoon are infiltrating the pirate ship to go get Kumji and to rescue the women from being sent to the Kai Empire. And so in volume 7, you start out with that. You have Kumji getting shot, and then from there, you have Yona bumping into Suwon. You have the events of that taking place, and then they start looking for Zeno. And then volume 8 starts with them meeting Zeno, and then right after they meet Zeno and they decide to go see Iksu, right about that time, we get the events of Suwon visiting the Earth Tribe that we see in episodes 15 and 16 of the anime. They put that there, right in the middle as they're off to see Iksu. They put that in there, and then when that little part with Suwon is over, then we cut back to Yona doing the sword play and her and Hawk having that moment in the cave, and then it cuts off right where the anime cuts off. And in the manga, the timeline works really well. It makes complete sense why they put it there that way, because it kind of, you have this series has done a really good job of portraying like the travel arcs in series very realistically. It's not that they're on one side of the country and then the next chapter they're on the other side. It shows them moving there. So it makes sense that while they're moving back to Iksu, we cut back to Suwon and see what he's doing. And it kind of ties to why Suwon was in the Earth Tribe to begin with and how he ran into Yona in the first place. He was on his way to see Gunti. So it's like, oh, okay, makes sense in the story. In the anime, though, it wouldn't make much sense to organize it the way that the manga does, because what would have happened would be we basically get up to episode 24, and in the middle of episode 24, we'd have the events of episode 15 and 16, and then we'd cut back to the events of episode 24. So one thing I do respect about the mangaka is that she doesn't create this manga to fit an anime 23-minute episode format. So that's why it makes sense why the anime was like, well, this part with Suwon and Gunti together, and the Earth Tribe and the War Game section, it doesn't really tie to the rest of the story, but it is important because it's setting up the Suwon is making those connections with those generals and getting them on his side. Because later in episode 21, it comes back to that when the dragons are all talking with Hawk, and Kija makes the note, well, if we go to war with Suwon, we'll have to go to war with the other 5 generals as well. It's not going to be as simple as it seems. So it makes sense that we cut to Suwon making those connections and tie it back to their discussion. It makes sense both ways. It's like apples and bananas. I like apples and I like bananas. So the anime version does it well. The manga version does it well. It's like you pick and choose which one you like better, but I think that both are really good. So I have no issues with either one. There is one section, though, that is left out in Volume 7 that I want to talk about. I'm going to put some pictures up here to show you all. There is a section, though, in Volume 7, before we get to that added chapter that's not adapted in the anime, there is a section that explains why Hawk did not go with Yona that day. So it shows Yona waking up and everybody's just passed out, and she decides to go on a walkabout on her own. I'm glad the manga explains that a little more. And the manga includes like a few little tiny details throughout that expand on the characters and expand on the moments. There's a moment in Volume 8 where Yona's trying to get everyone to teach her how to do swordplay. And she goes up to Sinha, and Sinha sees her like accidentally cut herself on a sword, and he's like, oh, I don't want to teach you, you might hurt yourself. And he runs away. Kija doesn't know how to teach her swordplay, and then she goes up to Gija, or to Jeha, and Jeha is basically like, oh, what is this, Yona? Are we gonna have a tryst? And she's like, no! And then Hawk's like, what are y'all doing? And she's like, we're having a tryst! It's like, ah! So it's great, but little tiny moments like that, and just like any shoujo manga, the mangakas have little notes out to the side as you read, which are really fun. Like there's one little note where the author says the ages of the characters, like Jeha's the eldest at 25, and then Kija is 20, and then Sinha is 19, Hawk, Suwon are both 18, Zeno is 17, Yona is 16, and we established that Yoon is 15. And they don't say what Ao is, the squirrel. We don't know how old Ao is. But I like that. I like that Jeha's the eldest and Yoon is the youngest, which is funny because personality-wise, Yoon is like the oldest of them all. And the mangaka makes a note that in Volume 8 that Hawk and Suwon both seem older than they are because they're both only 18. They seem way more mature. The mangaka also says that if the mangaka was a character in Yona the Dawn, she would be Yuno, which is Gunti's wife of the Earth Tribe. And I think that's really cool. That's her little self-inserted character. I'm like, aw, that's adorable. But in Volume 7, there is a chapter, and it's right before they meet Zeno. It's amazing. And so I'm going to include pictures of it here. But basically, long story short, somebody from the White Dragon's village is trying to get him this dragon scale. And she explains that the dragon scales that he has can be used for a love potion. And that seems really fanficky and weird. And I get why they probably didn't animate it, because it's kind of like a little side standalone chapter at the end of the volume. It doesn't really tie to much else going on plot-wise. But it makes sense, though, when you think about it, because the dragons are all tied to Yona, and they're all, prophesize that they have to love Yona, right? They don't have a choice. So it makes sense that the scales have like a aphrodisiac, like a property to them. And so Jeha decides that he's going to test this theory. They don't want to test it on Yona because they're afraid, what if it works? And Yoon thinks it's a poison, so he's like, somebody test it, but it's not going to be me. And so Jeha volunteers, and he just licks the scale. He licks it, and it instantly works. For a very brief period of time, he staggers, and Kija catches him. And for a brief moment in time, Jeha believes he's in love with Kija. And I love this in the manga, that he's like, there are things that I hate. I hate chains, I hate being tied down, and I hate you, but now I can't keep away from you. And it's like, oh no, enemies to lovers. I'm a big shipper of Kija and Jeha. And this chapter was it was sending me. It was a really, really good chapter. I was laughing so hard. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe we're having this. This is happening. But there's a setup in this chapter, too, where Jeha is, again, ribbing Kija that he is, devoted to Yona and against his will. And Kija's like, well, we're supposed to be devoted to her. That's our job. And it reminded me a lot of Hawk, right? It reminded me a lot of Hawk, because Hawk's whole thing was, he's like, I have a duty to protect Yona. And Kija's whole thing is very similar. And so Jeha ends up taking the scale, and long story short, he dissolves the scale in a cup of water, And he leaves it out. We also find out that Kija is basically friend-zoning Sinha. That ship is not sailing anytime soon. But they run off and leave the glass of water, and Kija drinks it unsuspectingly. And the first person he sees after drinking it is Yona. And there's this it's very intense, but he basically, like, asks to touch her, and, like, his dragon hand gets huge, and he's, like, by her, and then she's like, what are you doing? Because Yona's oblivious. And so she's like, what are you doing? And then he's like, oh my God, what am I doing? And he freaks out. And it gets really sad afterwards because you kind of suspect that Kija, he's like, well, my job is to cherish and protect Yona. So that's the dragon blood in me. That's what it's doing. But you kind of get the impression that no, Kija does like Yona. He does like her. Like genuinely, not just because of the blood. But Jaeha's words have kind of affected him. And he thinks it's just the blood making him do it. And so there's a little part there at the end where he says she's 16, she's going to start falling in love with someone, and it's my duty to protect her and be happy for her. And I felt really bad because I'm like, that's pretty much what Hawk is going through right now. But then a part of me was like, I ship Yona with Hawk, so sorry. I'm a multi-shipper, but I was like, I'm in-game Hawk and Yona, so I'm like, but I felt bad for Kija, right? I feel bad for him. And everything that he goes through in these chapters. But yeah, and there's also a part of Hawk angst in this too, because Yona's like, oh, it was really interesting to be seduced by a man. I've never been seduced by a man so passionately before. And Hawk makes the line, he's like, well, I could seduce you. And she's like, oh, Hawk, tell that to someone you love. It's like, and Hawk's like, fine, then I will. I'm like, so yeah, Yona is still oblivious, but that chapter is amazing. If you are a Kija and Jaeha shipper, you need to get volume 7 for that chapter alone. It's great. The drawing is amazing in this series. I love the little mangaka notes. That's probably why I'm most excited about reading this with y'all, because I feel like the mangaka leaves such cool notes, and it's so fun that I'm like, oh yeah, this will be great to read. I'm pretty excited. So, yeah, but that's pretty much volume 7 and volume 8. It pretty much, I will say this, and we've commented on YouTube about this, the manga does a great job of portraying the fire in Yona's eyes, and in the moment where Suwon is about to have the upper hand against Gunti and then he trips over his robes, the manga does a good job, but the anime really makes that vibrant and come alive, and that's why I wish we had a second season. Right now we're going to start on volume 9, because that's where the anime leaves off at. But there's 33 or 34 volumes in English right now, so they have plenty of material they could adapt for a second season. I'm just saying. Just saying. So, until then, though, we're going to read the manga, and maybe that will spurn it to come into existence. Who knows? But I'm pretty excited. Volume 8 pretty much just covered everything that was happening in the last episode, and then included the events of episode 15 and 16, and they're pretty much beat for beat, too. So, it's a great volume. I really like the manga, so reading those first 8 volumes has me very excited to get into this 9th one and go from there. And just see, if the anime cut off, we'll see what they're missing, right? I did have someone comment saying that they thought that the anime wouldn't be able to do the manga justice, and I'm like, ooh, very exciting. So how I'm going to do this is basically just reading the manga and reading with you and pausing for exciting parts, of course, but overall, I'm just excited to read this with y'all and see what all happens, right? So we're going to read it, and then I'm going to come back at the very end and give overall thoughts about the volume, and we'll just go from there. I'm excited, y'all, so let's do this, shall we? We're going to get into volume 9 of Yona of the Dawn, and we're going to start that here in 3, 2, 1, and here we go. Oh my gosh. We just went through so much in one volume. Oh my gosh. Okay. If this is what we have to look forward to with Yona in every volume, oh my gosh. So this was crazy. There was Tae-jun being back in the story. I've got theories. Buddy got theories. Okay. Interesting. Okay, I have theories. Oh man. Okay. I am so curious now. This is fascinating. So the dark dragon and the happy hungry bunch. Oh my god. And it just kept getting worse and worse as the story went on. It finally was the famished family. Oh my gosh. So There's so much that happened in this volume. So much that happens. Where do we even start? I guess we'll start from the beginning and go through this. I like that we're focusing on the fire tribe now. It's like we're going through all the different tribes. We focused on the earth tribe. We had that with Kumji. And Kumji was an easy antagonist, right? And not that and by easy, I mean he was a very straightforward, concrete antagonist that was awful. Like, he was awful. There was really no redeeming qualities about him. And so he was easy to defeat as an antagonist. My theory is, as we keep going through this series and go to each of the villages, the antagonists are going to get more layered and complex. And then the final boss is Suwon, right? And he's like the most complex person in this. So, But yeah, I like the idea that Yona says here. She's like, we stand out horribly. So at this point, we might as well embrace it. But I like this idea about being the bandits. It starts out seeming like it's a fun idea. Oh, we'll just be like the Robin Hoods, right? We'll just be bandits. We'll be like Robin Hood. We'll take the taxes back and give them back to the villagers. And there'll be no consequences. But that's not really what happens. It's not really what happens. In this story, what ends up happening is things get a lot more complicated. And Yona, they take on so much, but then we have real bandits show up, and Yona and Sinha get into a big tussle and all this. We have real bandits show up, and now we've got the fire tribes, the general's favorite sons, involved, and he sends Tae-jun to go take care of it. Oh my god, Tae-jun. We will talk about Tae-jun. Oh. But so things get more complicated, and this idea of just being a Robin Hood is not going to be as glamorous or simple as it sounds. There's going to be things complicating that. And so I like that for the moment it's working. They're just trying to save, they're just trying to help, they're trying to save these villages and help keep them alive. But things are going to get more complicated as we go. Man, Yuna's drawn so well in this volume. Yuna's drawn so well. Yona's drawn so well. Those two especially, Yoon's expressions in this volume are gorgeous. And so, it's like storming outside through all of this. But yeah, so Yona trying to become stronger. Zeno is interesting. Zeno is like, in the last volume in the anime, there's brief glimpses where Zeno seemed like really smart and really kind of almost menacing. But then in this volume, he's totally, like, Zeno is taking a back seat, even though he was on the cover page. He's taking kind of a back seat, and he's just really happy and sprightly. And Kija's like, you don't do anything. You just run around. He's like, I'm just here to make sure we have fun. It's like, and he's the youngest of the dragons, so it's interesting. But I'm curious when we'll get Zeno backstory. This is mainly Sinha's volume. Sinha and Tae-jun, this is really their volume, and Yoon. It was like Yoon, Tae-jun, and Sinha. It was their volume. And Yoon I like the idea that Yoon tries to seem introverted and closed off, but he really cares about people and he's trying to help them. And then it's kind of funny. We have our three people who are kind of closed off in this story, and we explore them more. I mean, Tae-jun has become closed off since he thinks Yona died, but Sinha and Yoon are the quieter characters, the more like softer spoken characters. And so seeing this volume kind of focus on them is very interesting. But yeah, setting all this up, and I like the idea that as they're helping to fix the roof and everything, Hawk tells the lie. He's like, oh, we got all the fish from the river. And Yoon's like, there is no river near here. What? And then you find out they all lied, saying that they had ate food when really they were going hungry to help the village. And Yoon's like, he finds that so appreciative. But I love this line, Iksu, the people who you predicted would shake up Koka are all idiots. They are. They're just a pack of idiots. But they're our idiots. And I love them. But, Sinha. Oh, buddy. We're going to get to him. And so, yeah, basically, Yona and them, they all decide they're going to play Robin Hood. Especially, and the Fire Tribe officials, they are making themselves easy antagonists because they were going to, kidnap these children and sell them. And we just dealt with human trafficking with Kumji. So, of course, I love that Jaeha's like, I've been a pirate. Like, being a bandit is not a step above for me. We're, on the same pay grade. But, yeah, I just love, and Hawk tries to hide himself with Sinha's mask and everything, with the hair from it. But yeah, so they go on this run as bandits, and then what ends up happening is they go to the next village, and Yona sticks behind with Sinha, and they end up getting attacked by actual bandits. And then it's not so fun anymore, right? And I love this. I love that a big chunk of this volume is Yona bonding with Sinha, because Sinha is so soft-spoken and introverted that he doesn't really talk to a lot of the characters in the show, and he kind of seems like him and Zeno are kind of opposites. I feel like Kija and Jeha are similar, they just don't realize it, but they're like, it's funny, I think I said this before in a reaction, but Jeha and Kija are opposites, but they have a lot of similarities, and Sinha and Zeno are polar opposites. Like, Zeno is so outgoing and loud-spoken, and Sinha's the polar opposite of that. But yeah, Sinha's whole thing with the eyes. Oh my gosh. I want to see this animated so badly. I want to see this animated. The dragon, the blue dragon. Oh my gosh. And we get finally an explanation of exactly how his powers work. Like, he can see, it's basically like he has the eyes of a god. And he can see, like, through someone, like, into their soul, into their heart. And he can paralyze any part of their body. And so if he wanted to paralyze their hearts, he could and kill them. But when he attacks them, it's like phantom limb. Like, he paralyzes their arm and it feels like it's been chopped off. That's why that guy felt like he was bit by a dragon. It paralyzed his arm. And so the guy felt like it had fell off. It's so freaky. The imagery was so freaky and cool. And then it makes sense that when he was a kid, he didn't know how to control it. He wasn't mature enough to use it. And so it all just burst out at once and killed them all. And now he's starting to control it, but it's built up over 14 years. Because, he's 19, so he was 5 when he used it last time. So he's not used this power in 14 years. And the blue dragon inside of him is like, I've been waiting 14 years for you to use me. And it just almost takes him over, right? Because it's like just a release of all this power at once. And his power is kind of like, I wonder if his power can be stored up and reserved, whereas Jeha and Kija's powers are always with them. Like, they have an arm and a leg, and that's an extension of their body. And they use it every day. So they're really equipped to use that power, and they're very, skilled in it. It doesn't control them because they use it constantly. I wonder if Zeno, my theory is Zeno is supposed to be like his whole body maybe is impervious to pain. He can't, because I think Ixu's prophecy said that one couldn't be struck by swords, and that sounds like Ixu. Or that sounds like Zeno. So I wonder if Zeno's ability is always on all the time as well. You just don't see it. And Sinha's power can be turned off, but then it just builds and builds and builds. And I love this. I love Yona bumping foreheads with him and being like, I want to see you smile. And I want to see you smile and be happy and express that. And Sinha not knowing how to smile and doing oh my God. I can't. I can't. It's so good. It's so sweet. But they take his sword away. I wonder where Sinha went. He lost his sword and they just ran away with it. I guess he got lost, but then these actual bandits show up, and it's just such a mess. And they're going to take Yona away, and I was worried. I was like, are we going to go that dark? Like, this series would do it. But then Sinha showing up, and the eyes. Yeah, chapter 50 release. Oh my God. And I love this. It's like the dragon inside of him. And Sinha is like, give me her back. But then you see his body, it's like the silhouette of his body in all black, and then it slowly transforms into the dragon, and then it's like these eyes, this monster's coming to devour me. I love that image of the dragon, with the giant head and the eyes just peering into him. And it's almost like the dragon the power is taking over Sinha for a second, right? Everything's so vibrant. And then those massive grown-ups look so tiny. I loved this. I loved that when he says that person's terrified. He's talking about the bandit. He says he looks so small. And then, I've done this before. And then talking about how Sinha felt looking at all the adults and then thinking they looked so tiny in his eyes. Oh my God. And then, he says his heart is so small. It's so cute. If I touch it, will it break? That's so dark. I did not picture Sinha being the one to have the creepiest power inside of him. The dragon side of him is actually kind of creepy. I can see why Ao was so horrified by that power, because if this dragon is constantly talking to him and constantly that power is constantly communicating with him, then I can see why Ao would be terrified of that. Oh my gosh. And then chapter 51, losing yourself. Oh. And then just this idea, I want to see more. And it's kind of weird because Hawk calling himself the Dark Dragon in this, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about this when we get to Tae-jun. But Hawk is not one of the 4 dragons, right? He's not. But he does have super strength. He has seemingly inhuman strength. And he does a lot too with the whole thing of like more and just wanting more. Like he wants to see Yona succeed. He wants to see more of this side of her. Like some of the things that Hawk has said in his internal monologues in the past kind of sound like what the blue dragon is saying as well. And that imagery of like the giant eyes saying, show me, show me. It's, oh God, it's so freaky. And then, yeah, he's like, his eyes can perceive everything in the world. Show me more. And then this part where he says, show me more, puny humans. My dragon eyes haven't been unveiled in 14 years. It's almost like in that moment, Sinha kind of loses himself to the dragon and he's not human for a moment. Like the dragon inside of him wants to come up because it says puny humans. Like it's just, he's reverting back to a dragon. The world is so much more interesting this way. And then Yona's drawn so well in this, like her look of just kind of concern and horror. And then him not recognizing her until she makes him look. And her looking into his eyes, it doesn't affect her, which is good. I was afraid that if he looked at her eyes that he could hurt her. And then, of course, Sinha would never forgive himself. But she sees his eyes as beautiful because she's the red dragon, right? She sees his eyes as beautiful. And, like, they could suck her in. She's like, I might be offering myself up for the blue dragon to consume. And she's, like, in the T-pose, ready to go. But somehow my heart is surging with emotion. And it's like I'm looking to his eyes for the very first time. And his eyes are like a newborn's. I love that imagery where she has her hand pressed against the dragon's head. And she just wants him to get stronger. And so it may make sense for Sinha to start using his power more so that he can get used to it and he can control it instead of just bottling it up for a decade and it releasing like this. Because Sinha is afraid that because of his power, she's not going to like him. But Yona's like, no, you're my moonlight. I'm going to like you no matter what. We both can become stronger together. And then I like that the dragon dissipates away from him and he goes back to being Sinha. I love that shot of her like holding his face in her hands. I don't ship Sinha and Yona romantically, but I love them together. And after this volume, I'm like, give me more Sinha and Yona like learning to fight together. I need more of it. I love it. And it's so crazy because Sinha is like the least confrontational person of the group, but his power is so confrontational. His power is just like this hungry monster that just wants more. It's greedy. Oh, ho, 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 ho. So yeah. And then apparently he's paralyzed alongside when he uses the power. And I thought that on page 126, like when she grabs his hand and says, when she grabs his hand, even though it's paralyzed, he can feel it, and she wants them to grow together. It reminded me, her grabbing his hand, the shot of it reminds me of when she grabbed Suwon's sword back in volume 8. Volume 7, she grabbed the sword too. It's like her grabbing this weapon and holding on to it. And I like that Sinha is still afraid, but he's like, I'll go, if Yona will call me by name, I'll go wherever she wants. I want to carry that name proudly. Aww. And then, of course, we see Yoon and them showing back up, and Hawk's like, we leave you alone for 5 minutes, and then what do? So yeah, so very interesting. We have the wake, and I love Yona grabbing, lots of hand holding in this chapter, but I love Yona grabbing Yoon's hand, and then both making a vow, saying that, and I like that Yoon is going to try to cultivate the herb that he got from Gigan to try to make medicine out of it so they can help more people. And I love Yona saying that she's like, I'm going to work hard too so that we don't have to have these funerals again. So we don't have to have wakes for these children anymore. I love that. And so then we have the tent scene. So I love the idea that Yona's like, I'll sleep with Hawk. And Hawk's like goes into panic mode. Hawk being like, shit, no, I can't sleep with her. No, this will not work. Which she brings up a good point. She's like, doesn't this remind you when it was just the two of us? And Hawk's like, well, I was only close to you because you were out of sorts and you weren't coherent. So it was different. And it was to protect you. So it was different. And now everybody's all gathered around them. And Hawk's like, it's no. He's like, I'm not sleeping anyway. And the whole point of her sleeping next to him was to take his sword so she could go practice. Of course it was. Of course it was. And then Hawk does no favors to himself when he's like, oh, if you're going to attack me in my sleep, you should at least try to make it look sexy. And she's like, Captain Oblivious. She's like, what? I just want you to teach me how to use a sword. I've been practicing on my own. And then, okay, so at the end of this chapter, Yona laments that she wants to become stronger. And she's like, I can't get stronger unless I practice, but I need somebody to teach me. And no one will do it, so I'm begging you, Hawk, please. I want to be strong. And Hawk saying, you're my master. You don't lower your head to a servant. Like, Hawk is still framing himself as her servant. I'm like, dude, okay. He's like, give me a sincere order and I can't refuse you. I'm like, Hawk's into the kinky stuff. Hawk is like, if you boss me around, I'm here for it. He wants to be ordered to do stuff. And he loves a woman that can kick his ass, clearly. And she says that's an order, and he says, I'm yours to command. So I had, back in the anime, the thought, when we went back to the sword and the shield conversation, I thought that the monarch would be Yona, and that the sword and shield would be maybe Suwon and Hawk. I'm like, okay, that makes sense, right? That makes sense. And then rereading the manga in volume 8, Kija brings up the idea that Suwon could be the monarch in the prophecy. And maybe it's Suwon that's the monarch in the prophecy, and then the red dragon will appear to fight the monarch. And it's that. And the sword and the shield to protect the monarch will happen. And so I was like, oh, okay. So then I wondered if Suwon was the monarch, then maybe Yona and Hawk would be the sword and the shield to help protect the kingdom from like an enemy attack or something. Maybe it's that, and then the red dragon will show up at dawn, and that's Yona. And either the sword or the shield is the red dragon. Okay, I don't think that anymore. My newly found theory that will be probably proven wrong in the next volume. Now I think that Yona is the monarch, but I think that Hawk might be the sword or the shield, and I think that Tae-jun might be the other one. Maybe, because I think that Hawk might be the sword or the shield, because he's like, he basically wants her to order him around. He takes her orders seriously and says that he's hers to command. He kind of does similar actions to the dragons. He's calling himself the Dark Dragon. Okay. But then he's completely devoted to her, just like the dragons. And when we get to the Tae-jun chapters, Tae-jun seems like he's completely obsessed with Yona and has been obsessed since he thought that she died. Like, he's been slowly withering away thinking that she's died, and he's wanted death, thinking that she's not in this world anymore. It's like he can't go on without her. It's very much like a dragon in the weirdest ways. I'm like, huh. And so, and the fact, what convinced me that he might be a sword or a shield in all of this is that when he started hearing Yona's voice, she lingers in his heart, and when he started to hear her voice, he got the strength to rise up against Jeha. And I was like, oh! So I'm wondering if it's a similar situation, that Tae-jun is going to end up as the sword or the shield. Because he seems like he's connected to her, more so than anybody else that's faced her. So, huh. And I said a few volumes back, I was noting this at the start of the reaction, a few volumes back, that there was like an alternate universe little comic strip that was on the side that the mangaka did, and she had Tae-jun and Yona married, and Hawk was protecting them, and it was really cute and funny. So I felt so bad for Tae-jun in this. He just walked around having a death wish, and then of course he doesn't know the dragons, he doesn't know Yoon, he knows none of them, he just knows Hawk and Yona. And so, but he heard Yona's voice, and that gave him strength. Oh my gosh. And calling Kija the god of death, saying that Kija had come to take him away. There's a lot of spirituality tied with the dragons in this volume with Sinha and Kija. He called Kija the god of death, and it was like the hand of death coming to take him away. And then you had Sinha acting like a deity looking through these puny humans. So it's very interesting, a lot of spiritual stuff going on in here. But then him thinking that he's never going to hear, he wants to hear Yona in the next life, and then he hears her voice, and that gives him strength. And it's like he said his blood boiled. So I'm like, that's like a dragon. And he gets the strength to rise up. And he says, just like the blue dragon, I want to hear her voice one more time. More. And then, of course, the volume ends with Kijun chucking him. You're in the way and tossing him away. So who knows? So who knows if Tae-jun is going to see Yona, or if he just got chucked out of sight and he's going to pass out. But oh my god, I think something's up with Tae-jun, and I'm like, they said that the sword and the shield would appear, and maybe Hawk isn't the sword of the shield. Maybe he's just the dark dragon that's going to be with the red dragon. I don't know. Maybe the sword and the shield are going to be two different things. But I have a feeling Tae-jun might be one of them. Which, I didn't like Tae-jun's character at first because he was so arrogant and like such a prick in the anime. But these last couple chapters, he's been so pitiful. And everybody's just like, even his own brother is like, you're too much of an annoyance to even kill. I'm like, oh my god. And his brother Kyoga is interesting. And so the only reason he doesn't kill him is because their dad hasn't approved. So that's going to be interesting. Here's the thing. I feel like they're setting up, if Tae-jun is the sword or the shield for Yona, they're setting up Tae-jun abandoning his role as the Fire Tribe son, because they've spent the last couple chapters basically saying that Tae-jun is a disappointing son. He's a disappointment, and that he wouldn't be missed. And so the only thing keeping them from killing him is their dad's approval, and their dad probably wants to keep him around just in case something happens to Kyoga. So could I see Tae-jun defecting from the Fire Tribe and joining Yona and her team? Yes. Would it be hilarious because then Hawk and them would have to deal with his ridiculousness? Yes. So, I don't know. I'm so fascinated, but this volume was amazing. I'm on board. All right, let's do this. I'm so excited to start volume 10, but maybe they'll animate this one day. I want to see the Blue Dragon, those chapters animated. And I can just picture the comedy with these chapters as well. So, I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. But these chapters were wonderful. I loved them. And now I'm excited for volume 10. So, I hope you all are too. So in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, next week we'll dive into volume 10 of Yona of the Dawn. Bye.